Junior stocks in precious metals have really started to gain traction. I think that's about to happen here in uranium. The juniors haven't quite caught a bid. They're starting to. And I think that's where the opportunity is. The way these cycles work, the juniors are sometimes the last to get moving. And so I think you are starting to see, capital trickle down there. And it's a good opportunity for people to invest right now, is invest in the juniors, because they have a lot of catching up to do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Triangle Investor Interviews. I'm your host, Lucian Valkovic, and before I announce my guest, just a quick reminder of a disclaimer. This interview and all my interviews are not a recommendation to buy or sell any shares, products, or services. Always do your due diligence and consult with your financial advisor. My guest today is Keith Bodnarchuk, CEO of uranium exploration company COSA Resources. Keith, thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, great to be back on here, Lucian.
Thank you. Let's touch on the recent news release from the company. I believe you had one yesterday. That release highlighted priority drill targets at Darby, based on historical uranium intersection and clay alteration in trends like 95B and 96D. First question about it is, what specific findings from the 2025 data review make these targets stand up as they are near Cigar Lake, right?
Yeah, certainly. So I think it's important to remember that, the Darby was one of the projects we got from Denison Mines with that recent transaction, whereby we acquired a 70% interest in the project. Pardon me. And it was a very important part of that transaction, right? So obviously, all three projects were important: Murphy Lake North, Darby, and Packrat. But really, Darby and Murphy Lake North were the two key projects to get in that acquisition, and they are very important to us. And when we acquired them, we held them kind of a 1A, 1B type scenario. And so Darby is right next to Cigar Lake, like you said. And, we, ahead of the transaction, we did a lot of desktop review. We did, we're able to look through the core photos. But it was wintertime, and the ability to go and take our time with the old drill core hadn't happened yet. And so this summer, Andy, our VPX, Steve, our chairman, and a few of our other geologists went out to site and had a chance to really look at all the old drill holes at Darby and go through systematically and look at what were the missed opportunities. Because sometimes with these older holes, you're relying on a paper log that could have been done, 20 years ago. And so, they had a chance to really go through the holes on a one-by-one basis and look at it from a whole. And what they realized was how, phenomenal. They kind of reiterated their theory that these targets are phenomenal. And it started with that Delta and Charlie trends. Those are the ones right next to Cigar Lake. Delta and Charlie both showing signs of what we want to look for, and really targets that we really want to follow up. And that release showed that. It showed two key targets that we want to head to in 2026 to follow up as soon as we can. And, it's just important to remind the market that how important Darby was to COSA when we acquired it from Denison Mines.
Yeah, so with winter 2026 drilling planned for Darby under Denison JV, how are you actually, you mentioned here some of the things, how are you prioritizing target testing, and what role does the shallow unconformity play in your drill strategy here?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, we obviously had some exciting results at Murphy Lake North, that we left the drill on site there. So that will be the first project we'll head to in early 2026. But as far as Darby goes, we'll look to get there in 2026 also and drill it. And so as far as, the depth to the unconformity, that plays a key role, right? It goes back to that, what Craig Perry used to say when our CEO at ISO, it's size of the prize, cost of the test, chance of success. So that cost of the test is key for an exploration company of our size, ensuring that we can cost effectively explore these areas and, find a deposit that is under, not that much sandstone cover. And so Darby, ranges from that 450 down to 600 on the west side of it. But where Delta and Charlie are the two trends we highlighted, in that release, they are on the shallower side. And when you go through a checklist of what you look for for drill targets, these trends basically tick all of those check boxes, and they have walk up drill ready targets that are ready to go for 2026, and it's exciting. I think when you take a step back, and you look, obviously how we had success at Hurricane when we were at ISO Energy. It's actually, Andy and Steve and the team were drilling at a project called Geiger at the time. And, the results weren't quite what they wanted. And they just recently acquired a project called the Rock East. And they had a good drill target they developed on it. And so they moved the drill to that. And that's ultimately where they found Hurricane. And so we're extremely excited by Murphy Lake North. We've had fantastic initial results there, and we're looking to head back there as soon as we can, factoring in the results we've had, the shallow depth to the unconformity, but we're ready to go with these other targets. And sometimes, sometimes it ends up being that second project you go to where you ultimately make that discovery. But that's why we just want to reemphasize that we're ready to go with multiple targets at these projects. And, standing side by side, both these projects have equal merit, I would say, as far as testing. But Murphy Lake North will be our first priority when you factor in. We left the drill on site there. It's on the shallower side to the unconformity when compared to Darby.
Yeah, I will ask you more about Murphy, but before I do that, I want to hear about Orbit. The October 1st announcement expanded Orbit by 15,000 hectares, targeting radon, helium, and hydrogen anomalies with EM conductors. How do these Pathfinder gases enhance exploration in a sandstone-free setting near Key Lake?
Yeah, so that's just another layer of information we can use to help prioritize targets, right? When you're outside of the sandstone cover, you are able to utilize different tools as far as targeting. And the reason we like Orbit, is it is a bit more, I'd say, almost unconventional about what we're targeting in that area, but it is starting to show some more conventional type targets as we've done geophysics, as we've looked at different layers of data we can review, and it's shallow, it's well located. Like I said, it's just sitting, proximal to Key Lake. And so it's another one that we've added to the pipeline. It's not something we'd look to drill next year, but we've always taken that approach of advancing these projects. And if we have success, which we hopefully do at Darby or Murphy Lake North next year, then we'd look to realize value on a project like Orbit in a different way. Right. And it gives us that optionality, but this is very cost effective exploration to continue to advance drill targets so that we're ready to go, with say 1 through 5 projects having fantastic drill targets. But the focus will be on Darby and Murphy Lake North at 2026 because those are our best drill targets.
Definitely. Murphy Lake North's 2025 drilling confirmed alteration and structure along the Hurricane Trend, just like you said. What key results from the 3,000-meter summer program have refined your focus on the Cyclone Trend for 2026?
Anytime you enter into a new area, so the Cyclone Trend is one that we fittingly named because it is parallel to the Hurricane Trend, and it hadn't seen any drill holes. When you look at it from a geophysical standpoint, it looked interesting. Geological, we thought it was going to be interesting, but 99% of the time when you go into a new area in the Athabasca Basin, you intersect what we call stick rock. It just doesn't quite show what you want. But when we start drilling that area with those initial holes, we started to hit interesting structure and alteration, kind of key ingredients of what you look for that can be surrounding a major deposit. And when we started to see the volume of the alteration, we're talking kilometer scale, that level of alteration can host a major deposit in the Athabasca Basin. And we simply just ran out of holes this season. We would have loved to kept drilling and continue to advance this, but now we've always taken that disciplined approach. We're analyzing our geochemistry results. We're looking at it from a structural standpoint. We'll be leaning on our JV partners, Denison, to have a discussion here in the next few weeks about follow-up targeting. But yeah, it's ticking all those boxes of what you look for, and hence we left the drill on site, and we have unfinished business there. We have to go back there and drill as soon as we can, and we know this, and so yeah, we're excited to get back there. And Murphy Lake North, the Cyclone Trend, upgraded that project further with those initial results we had this summer.
I like the sound of unfinished business over there. That's great. Keith, as you prepare for 2026 drilling at Murphy, how are you leveraging the Denison JV and your past hurricane discovery experience to optimize the exploration along the Rock Lake Trend?
Yeah, honestly, leveraging both. Obviously, there's a familiarity that our group has with that part of the basin. And then Chad Sorba is our technical advisor from the Denison side. And, he's had a tremendous amount of exploration success in the Athabasca Basin. He was part of the Phoenix discovery, Griffin discovery from the Denison side. I worked closely with him for about 9 years. And so when we have these joint venture meetings and these technical meetings, I really just get to sit back and watch Andy and Chad really dissect what we want to do, what plans we want to do. And, they take the right disciplined approach. There's always a chance in exploration that it's not there. And so you have to be systematic about how you approach these things. And these guys are developing fantastic targets at, Murphy Lake North and at Darby. Andy and Steve went ahead and relogged that core at Darby. And that's an important exercise. It really was an initial step of what led the team to find Hurricane. It's, you put all these rocks side by side and you look for missed opportunities from previous companies, right? That maybe potentially didn't know quite what they're looking for. Maybe it was their first pass into the basin at that time. And so, then Chad and I actually went in with Andy after and looked at the Darby core, and he walked us through what he was seeing. So I think, there's a lot of brain power in that room, and I just get to kind of sit back and enjoy it. And there's a lot of good geoscience and a lot of good experience that those guys are leveraging when targeting. So it's an important relationship, right? And it's a great relationship between the two groups as we look to pick our targets.
Yeah, so the gear is over there. When do you plan to start this exploration campaign? How many meters do you plan to go, and what is the depth?
Yeah, so Murphy Lake North, like I said, we left the drill on site there, so it'll be quite turnkey. It's a very active area. Cameco's in the area, ISO's in the area. So it's an exciting area to be exploring in the Athabasca Basin. So we'd look to get that going as early as we can in 2026. Even January, depending on ice conditions and stuff like that. But and Murphy Lake North will be the initial focus for us. As far as meters, we do have our JV meetings coming up here. I think we'll be able to update the market, as soon as we can after that. But we're looking at throughout the year, be a more significant program than our 2025 program at Murphy Lake North. And then obviously, we'd be working in Darby in 2026. Obviously, if we have success at Murphy Lake North, we can push Darby off if we need to. But the focus initially will be Murphy Lake North, and we're looking to do an expanded program throughout 2026.
Okay, you have a JV meeting soon, so you will have much more to say after this meeting. With your other non-JV projects, what is their current status and what are the plans?
Yeah, so there's a few other ones that we continue to advance in the background. We've done some work on our Orion project, which is really the Rock Lake trend, which comes down from Hurricane. It's a very exciting project. We continue to advance drill targets on that one. Cosmo is another one, which is an extension of a parallel trend. I think, Andy, Justin, and really the team have done a great job of acquiring this really strong pipeline of projects, and we'll continue to do cost-effective exploration on those projects. But now is kind of the most exciting time as a company. It's really carried over from 2025. This year is the money's going into the ground. It's just drill. All those 100% owned projects, they're in good standing, right? We don't need to be deploying a lot of capital on them. We can hang back on those ones while we put our capital towards drilling, because it is go time. We have exciting targets at both Darby, Murphy Lake North, and let's just drill as much as we can.
Yeah, you mentioned capital. How are you funded for this year?
Yeah, so we're on pace to finish the year with around $3 million or so in the treasury. For perspective, our last Murphy Lake North program, which is our largest drill program to date as a company, cost us around, under that $1.5 million range. Obviously having Denison there as a 30%, contributor, helps in that regard. And these shallow targets that we have at Murphy Lake North, where the target depth is at 250, 250 meters down, helps too. So it is very cost-effective exploration. And Andy and the team have done smart things like leaving the drill on site, we taking advantage of any winter conditions to mobilize stuff in. He's been doing it for almost 20 years now in that area, and so he's cheap in a good way as far as ensuring that we get the most meters as we can with our budget. So we're in good shape heading into this winter program.
Yeah, how is the cost per meter today at Athabasca, at the areas where you are exploring and drilling? What are the average cost per meter drilling?
Yeah, there's a range. Obviously, I think a good way to picture Murphy Lake North, I think because of the shallow targets, a good way to think about it is on a per hole basis, I'd say. Whereas if you obviously have deeper projects, the cost per meter, it might seem a bit more attractive. But on a per hole basis, our entire budget, was sub $2 million, and we did that includes both Denison and our proportions, and that was 8 holes, and so. I think, cost per meter has gone higher these days, I think across, the mining sector, just in the inflationary environment we're in, but, we've done a good job of reducing that as much as we can. And I think if you do have success, you can put in scale and really reduce that cost. But yeah, it's something we're very aware of. It is a different environment than it was, say, when, I had the opportunity to drill up Phoenix when I was working with the team at Denison and things like that. Like it is more costly these days, but I think we offset that by, I think, having a lot more experience than even we did then, as far as leveraging the cost per meter and reducing it.
Definitely. Yeah. Keith, final question. The uranium market, we are seeing signs of life, if I may call it. No, really, the uranium market, I see stocks, some of this group of the stocks are ripping, some are less ripping. What's your take on the uranium market going forward?
Yeah, I feel like it's finally happening as far as what we've been waiting for past 4 or 5 years. You're starting to see, obviously, the producers took off, like the Camecos and stuff, going to all-time highs. The developers have really caught the bid, and you're seeing juniors slowly start to trickle up. But you almost compare it to precious metals and gold, about 12 months ago, where everybody said, the junior market's dead. It's not going to move. It's not going to move. Now you see, junior stocks in precious metals have really started to gain traction. I think that's about to happen here in uranium. The juniors haven't quite caught a bid. They're starting to. And I think that's where the opportunity is, the way these cycles work. The juniors are sometimes the last to get moving. And so I think you are starting to see, capital trickle down there. And it's a good opportunity for people to invest right now, is invest in the juniors, because they have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, agreed. That was Keith Bodnarchuk, CEO of uranium exploration company COSA Resources. Keith, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks, Lucian.